Assalamu alaikum. My name is Shahbaz Taseer. To give you a little context as to why I'm here, my father was Shaheed Salman Taseer. He was the former governor of Punjab, and on the 4th of January in 2011, he was assassinated for asking for a woman who was later declared innocent by the Supreme Court of Pakistan to have the right to a free and fair trial. My father believed that all laws should exist to uplift society, and that as administrators, your job is to rule fairly, justly, regardless of a person's caste, creed, color, or religion. A few months after my father was murdered, I was attacked and abducted on my way to work from right outside my office in Gulberg by a group who was first affiliated with the Afghan Taliban and later ISIS. And security forces and intelligence agencies all over the world widely regard them as the most dangerous, the most ruthless, and the most cruel militant group that operates under these umbrellas. I spent almost 5 years in their captivity. I spent a lot of time in solitary confinement being tortured. I spent a lot of time running from what felt like the entire world's war machinery aimed directly at me. But obviously it was to rid the world of this nuisance. And I could actually stand here and take up all your time and afternoon talking about my kidnapping and what I went through and my torture. But I think moments like these and conversations like these are important because I don't want to actually tell you about what happened to me, but I want to tell you about the 3 things that exceeded all my expectations and gave me the strength to survive, to fight for my tomorrow, which sometimes seemed very bleak. The first thing was an understanding of my father's legacy. When my father was murdered, he became a symbol of resistance to a lot of people in Pakistan because Pakistan was going through a very dark, very difficult time. He was a hero to a lot of people. His death was very controversial. People celebrated it as well. For me, he wasn't a governor, he wasn't a hero, he was just my Abba. And burying him was possibly the hardest thing that I ever had to do in my life. And besides that, I think the slightly selfish part about it from me was that I mourned him as my father. Only when I went through my own ordeal, only when I went through my own trials, my own difficulties, where I realized that he was more than a father. He really was a symbol of resistance against very dark forces. He really was a hero. And he had lived his life with stories that would inspire not just his son, but any ordinary person facing a very, very difficult time in their life. When I was in solitary confinement and I was being tortured, I remember I used to go through a process because in order to survive something like this, sometimes I find it almost unfair to explain it because there's a method to this madness and surviving this madness. So when I would be tortured, afterwards I would try to analyze and heal myself, first from the physical side of it, and secondly, mentally prepare myself for the next day, because I knew this would never end. Every single day, it would get more extravagant, more brutal, more cruel. And I remember one of the mistakes that my kidnapper made was that while he was torturing me, he told me that I deserved this because of who my father was. And I know political figures are controversial, they divide opinion. But to me, my father was a good man. He was an honest man. He was a selfless man. And he lived his life like that. He died like that. He never died for me. He didn't die for power. He didn't die for wealth. He died for an innocent woman who needed help. And so when my kidnapper said this to me, he almost ignited something inside me, a small resistance, where he would tell me that this was happening to me because of whom my father was, and I would tell myself, well then, how can a man die better than facing fearful odds for the honor of his father and the temple of his gods? And there is strength in legacy. There is strength in stories of men and women that have strived and sacrificed for things greater than themselves. And I was very lucky that during a very difficult, a very, very dark period in my life, I had this amazing man's stories to inspire a little bit of resistance in me. The second thing that has exceeded my expectations is my family's undying belief that I would come home. And not just something as naive as me coming home, but me coming home as the same person that left. And honestly, if you're being tortured and bombed every single day, that sounds crazy. Or as, I love Deadpool Wolverine when Deadpool says to him, that's an educated wish. That's exactly what their belief was. It was an insane educated wish. There was absolutely no way that I could survive or come home as the person that I was. And it is naive, almost adolescent to believe this. But such was my family's faith. Such was their belief. I'm going to tell you 3 stories. The first one is of my mother's. It's a little funny, but she gets very angry about it because at the time it wasn't funny. When I was kidnapped, I had no contact with my family, so after 6 months of living in complete darkness, my kidnapper came in and told me that today you're going to speak to your mother. If she doesn't give the ransom, we're going to get rid of you, as in from the earth. So I said, wow, that's a realization one shouldn't have at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And he said, prepare yourself. And I thought, you can prepare yourself for an exam, but how do you prepare yourself for death? But anyways, and I made a simple decision. I said, I can spend these last few moments begging and crying, or I can be a little dignified and I can go with a little bit of dignity, and I can just tell my mother something that will give her strength, because it must be difficult for a woman to have buried her husband and then have to bury her son as well. It's for absolutely nothing, for nothing that the family has done. And as I said this to my mother across the phone, I hadn't spoken to her in 6 months, and I said, I love you, and I just want you to know that I'll be in a better place. And don't watch anything that they send you. And almost felt like, a shoe came across the phone to hit me. And, she was so confident. She just said to me, I have left you in God's hands and nothing will happen to you. You will come home safe. And then she told me to give the phone to the kidnapper. And then they started to threaten each other. And that was, for me, hilarious because I was in the balance over there. And as they're threatening each other, my mother turns to him and she goes, all right, you kill him then, and it'll be body for body. And I was like, excuse me. We must negotiate. It cannot be body for body. One of these bodies is my body. But the woman had this undying belief that the hands that she had left me in were the safest hands, and they were. Because no matter how dark or lonely my day, my night got, I knew that I had to fight to get back home, to show her that her faith was not wrong, that what she believed would one day, inshallah, come true. And I think that was one of the greatest gifts that I could give my mother, was coming back a little mad, but pretty much the same person to her. And I always believed that someone like her deserved to have her prayers answered. But anyways, the second story is about my younger sister. She hates it when I tell this story, but it's important for me, for people to understand who I am as a person. While I was going through my most difficult period of being tortured, and I told you that you have to go through this mental exercise where you prepare yourself. And it's a very unfair situation for anyone to be in. I never wish that anyone is in that position. But you have to find something to hold on to, because you have to wake up the next day, you have to survive the next day, you have to be sane, and that's the most important thing, because the line between insanity and sanity is so bleak and so thin. You can't afford to go on this side. You're in such a difficult position. And Nelson Mandela had died, and my kidnapper came, and he had this printout, and there were tweets from my family, and he came to insult me, to tell me that, look, your family is mourning this infidel. And from everything that I saw a tweet from my sister that said, prisoners of conscience are always free. So if you're listening, you're free. And I remember sitting there in complete darkness, alone, telling myself that I will go home to tell her that I was listening, that I was listening. And I still remember when I came home and I met her and I told her, I was like, I was listening, Bano, I was listening. And we had tears in our eyes, but it was such a wonderful thing, that faith, for that faith of someone else to be rewarded. And it still helps her whenever she faces any difficulty in her life, whenever my mother faces difficulty, my brother faces difficulty, and not in terms of me being kidnapped again, but normal day-to-day things. They have that undying faith and belief that, it'll be okay, because our prayers have been answered. And the third story, because we're running short on time, is about my best friend. And everybody needs a friend who's like a brother, and everyone has a friend who's like family. And there's nothing better than having that one friend that you grow old with, and you start off in your teens, and then you're in your 40s with children, and you go on holiday. But my best friend, and probably my only friend, who was kind of in the loop about what was going on with me throughout my kidnapping, there was a period of 1 year when I had moved to Afghanistan. The war was quite serious. These groups had inner fighting, and my family hadn't heard from me in over a year. And one of my other friends asked him, very close to me coming back, my other friend asked him, he said, do you think that we are naive? Do you think that we're childish, that we still believe that he'll come back? I mean, it's insane. This is a war zone. The man is dead. Shouldn't we accept this? And my best friend said that if something had happened to Shahbaz, I believe that the universe would tell me, but I feel him. And I just believe that he's safe and that he'll come home. And I promise you, 14 days after that conversation, I came home. So that is the kind of undying belief that exceeded my expectations as far as my family and friends were concerned. And the last thing, and I'll try and keep it very short, the last thing that has always exceeded my expectations, I always look at my life in two periods: post-kidnapping, pre-kidnapping, post being a man of faith, and being a man of little faith. That's how I look at my life. One of my favorite movies has this line. It says, rebellion is built on hope. Hope is what rebellion is built on, one of these. And it's so true. Rebellion really is built on hope. But hope comes from faith. It comes from a belief that no matter how dark and windowless the room you find yourself in, the hole you find yourself in, the situation you find yourself in, it is just another opportunity for your Creator to give you light, to show you His magnificence in the form of miracles. I am only standing here today because countless miracles happened before my eyes, when every single time I thought, this night will be my last, this moment will be my last. And my faith in my Creator for that window in a windowless room was repaid with me standing actually here in front of all of you. And that is what my faith did for me. It gave me hope that no matter how difficult my journey is, it's my journey. It was meant for me. That no matter how cruel someone is to me, that cruelty is of no doing of my own. But there is something I can do. It's very difficult, but it's to stand up when I have fallen. And the very fire that my oppressor tried to burn me in molded me into something that he could not break. And that came from my faith. That is why when my mother prayed that my son come home the same man that left, that is why I came home the same person, mind, body, and soul. Maybe a little crazier, but the same person. Because of my faith and my belief that no matter what happens, I will have a chance at a better tomorrow. And with that, thank you and God bless you.